Welcome to the program. This is Linda Strasburg with Interviews and Interactions. I got to go up to one of my favorite places today, up to the Park City Art Festival in Salt Lake City. If you've never been there, plan a visit at the first weekend in August because it's so fun to go up there and look at all the art. And it's really interesting about you. I was looking at the different art today, and there's some that you can tell the things were made to sell, like a marketing art. And then there's other items, craft items, that they're built. They're not just paintings, but there are paintings and photographs, and you can just tell when their passion is involved in the art. And it just kicks it up about 10 notches, the art. And most of them, I mean, the art appeals to different people, different types of art. Where your heart is in it appeals to different type of people. And then there's the art that appeals to everybody that's made to market. So it's really different to discern the difference between the two. And I always contend that when your heart is in something, it makes it so much better and more beautiful. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to have two authors on that have their heart involved in the book that they wrote. And the first one is The Rainbow Bridge, A Bridge to Inner Peace and to World Peace with Brent Hunter. And the second one is Leadership by Choice, How to Increase Your Influence and Effectiveness Through Self-Management. And that is Eric Papp. So I'd like to welcome Brent and Hunter to our program. He's the author of The Rainbow Bridge. Welcome to the program, Brent.
Thank you, Linda. Great to be here.
First, we need to start and talk about what exactly is the Rainbow Bridge.
Okay, well, the Rainbow Bridge it started out as a book that I wrote. The initial edition came out in 2001. It was actually a very small book, deliberately small book. It was about 3.5 inches by 5 inches or so, the kind you could just stick in your shirt pocket. And it was, again, deliberately a small book that was intended to distill the common ground in the world's major wisdom traditions down to the smallest amount of information possible, which is basically the heart essence of the world's major wisdom traditions. Then I got a lot of really positive feedback from family and friends, and then I expanded the book and came out with the second edition, an expanded edition, in 2003. And then that was the second edition. That book was actually translated into 23 languages by a team of volunteers and fans around the world. And then in 2011, I published the 10-year anniversary edition, the third edition of The Rainbow Bridge, and then changed the subtitle to A Bridge to Inner Peace and to World Peace. And so the Rainbow Bridge it illuminates the common ground in the world's major wisdom traditions, and it creates a common ground that can be used by every single person in the world. And I feel this is something very, very important for the time that we live in right now. We were living in a time when some of us, myself included, have lots of amazing things going on in our lives. And there's also a great many people, unfortunately, in the world who are having tremendous suffering. And so we've got to create this bridge from where we're living today, from our present living conditions, to a world that works for all. So it's a bridge across time, if you will. And it's a bridge that connects every person from every different religious perspective, as well as every different age group. It's basically this common ground that spans across different religions and cultures and ages and different physical geographies around the world. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the Rainbow Bridge is about.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I heard a statistic a while ago, just a few days ago, actually. I was listening to something, and they said in the 1990s, at the first of the 1990s, there was 12,000 murders committed in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The first part, it was during the first years of the 1990s. And they reported those 12,000. The reporting on the news was just minimal. They didn't talk about them very much. Over the years in the 1990s, the reporting went up 600% on murders. So it seemed like we had thousands and over like hundreds of thousands, because that's all that was on the news. So I welcome one of my goals, and I see that it's your goal as well, is to bring a balance back into what is really going on in the world. That there's good people out there, and the reporting should be balanced, but it's not. And so it has created a fear-based society instead of a rainbow bridge society. And each person that adds to the opposite, I think, is welcome in this world, because there are people out there doing wonderful things. I noticed the very first part of your book, you have, as you think, so it is. And I found that was fascinating that you put that at the very first of your book, and I'm sure that was intentional, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly was. The whole idea behind the concept of as you think, so it is, goes to the idea that our minds really are extremely powerful, much more powerful, I think, than the regular person realizes. And so as we imagine something is going to take place in a certain way, the very act of thinking that thought will actually increase the probability that it will happen in that way. So the power of our minds is very important, and this is, I mentioned that the Rainbow Bridge illuminates the common ground in the world's wisdom traditions. Each of these concepts are what I'm calling universal principles. And so one of the principles is this concept that whatever it is that we're thinking in our mind is extremely powerful, because it actually puts the gears of the universe in motion, if you will, and sets things off in a certain direction. So we have to be very careful about what we think and about how we think about things. And so, one example is if we take a fatalistic view and opinion about what's happening in our world and what the future is going to look like, if we just think that it's, we've never had peace in the world and we've always had war and suffering and violence and poverty and we always will, if we think that, then we're increasing the probability that it'll actually turn out that way. Mm-hmm. But if we realize that we can make a break with the past, that we can create a positive future that in fact works for everyone, even though we may not know exactly how to create that, if we keep that in our mind and know that it's possible to create a better future for everyone in the world, that will also then increase the probability that will happen. Mm-hmm. And so really the power of our mind is extremely important.
I agree with you. I have a relative that I know that is paranoid, and I'll be darned, she's so leery of everybody like cheating or doing something wrong. She gets people cheat her,
yes,
and things
exactly.
happen to her. It's like you have to take yourself everywhere you go. And on a large scale, you're talking about that worldwide, and on a small scale, it happens with each of us. What we expect, what we think, what we focus on, and they're finding that in quantum physics in a scientific way, that what we send out and what we focus on is actually what comes back to us. And you can change things around, and you can do it on a larger scale with a lot of people, and I'm sure that looks like one of your goals for writing this book, is that it can be created on a large scale.
Yes, thank you, and that's a very important point, because we start individually. Everything always starts within ourselves. But if we're talking about creating a better world, and we take the responsibility to understand the power of our own minds in creating our own life, but then we take that concept and apply it to our circle of friends, our family, our local communities, our states, and our nations and our world, then we realize that we can take these concepts one at a time and really implement them and create a better world. And when we realize that we have the miracle of the Internet at our disposal, that is extremely powerful, because the Internet allows us, and we're kind of getting used to it now. It's been around for several years at least, and so the power of the Internet is extremely powerful. We can communicate with people all around the world instantaneously for almost no cost whatsoever. And so the concept of being able to share our thoughts and sort of come to a common agreement and common intentions and about what life is like here on the planet and what we would like it to be like, then we can come together and we can collaborate worldwide to create this better world. And it all comes down to what is it that we're thinking, what is it that we're intending, and what is it that we would all like to have in terms of a better world. So yes, it's a very important concept, and most certainly the idea of using these principles completely globally is a core part of the book.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you. Imagine the power of that, spreading the good and the good messages around the world. I was involved in a project called the Golden Rule Project, and when they had artists in Salt Lake City, they had the Golden Rule written in every different religion. And it sounds so much alike, but it's embedded in almost every religion as a core belief. And yet religions tend to separate us sometimes. But this Golden Rule, the goal was to have people come together under the umbrella of the Golden Rule. And it was phenomenal how people, when they read that, they were surprised that actually every other religion was teaching that. And the premise of your book is the fact that that's true, that there's these threads that are woven through all of the world.
That's correct, and yeah, it is surprising to some people who feel that they may have heard a story that came from one particular religion or tradition, and they're surprised to hear, oh, lo and behold, wow, that principle is in all the other traditions, and so a little bit of education can really go a long way.
I think as part of the news media, part of authors to point out the commonalities between people instead of pointing out the differences. I mean, we celebrate differences, and we also celebrate the commonalities between people and our ties together. I'd like you to share with us, and you might hear music start to go to the break, but and if you need to finish, we'll do it after the break. But what is the Department of Peace concept?
The Department of Peace concept is a concept that I can't really give you all the detailed specs about who started it and all that. I know Marianne Williamson and Dennis Kucinich are major proponents of this, but we have a Department of Defense in the U.S. The idea is that let's create a Department of Peace so that we can then create plans and kind of rally around this concept and goal of creating peace. If we have a Department of Defense, it's
there's
really
our music. I want to come back because I think that's a really key concept in your book.
Sure.
It's an underline to the things you're writing about in your book. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about the Department of Peace instead of the Department of Defense. This is Linda Strasburg with the Rainbow Bridge, Brent Hunter. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. This is Linda Strasburg with Interviews and Interactions, and we've been talking about, instead of the Department of Defense, how about a Department of Peace with Brent Hunter, the author of The Rainbow Bridge. Brent, continue your ideas about the Department of Peace. I love it.
Sure. So let me just kind of start again to kind of summarize. So we have a Department of Defense here in the U.S., and many countries around the world obviously have something similar. And the whole point of those departments are to defend their country, but also they're not just defense; they have offense as part of their planning capabilities as well. And there's a great amount of resources, a huge amount of resources, especially here in the U.S., that are put behind the Department of Defense. So imagine if we could create a Department of Peace, which would kind of be the opposite force for organization and for coming together around the concept of figuring out how do we create a peaceful world, how do we create more peaceful collaborative relationships with our different partners around the world, other nations in the world, other organizations, institutions, businesses, nonprofit organizations, etc. And so the idea of a Department of Peace is to take some of the resources that we have at our disposal, and then getting back to what we were saying before, as we think, so it is. Well, if we're constantly thinking about war and constantly thinking about defending ourselves, well then we're going to be creating, situations where we're going to need to defend ourselves. But if we've got an organization of people trying to create peace and peaceful outcomes and solutions, then we are going to increase the probability that those actually happen. And so all around the world, this notion of a Department of Peace has been spreading. Some countries call this the Department of Peace. Some of them call them Ministries of Peace. But really there is a movement around the world in many different countries to create an arm of their government which is focusing on peace. And I think it's tremendous and very exciting and really important in terms of helping to create a shifting in the way things are moving in the world.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea. I've never heard of it, and I do tons of radio shows on topics like this. I love in your book how you were talking about that we are the guardians of the earth and the environment, and instead of just consumers, that we are also guardians. And you allude to the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, the 4-H clubs are adopting that perspective, and there's more and more people doing that. That's part of the Rainbow Bridge, isn't it? Is to promote that or let people know about that.
It certainly is. Basically what I'm trying to do is the first part of the book talks about the universal principles. And by the way, I have to say, so after I wrote these universal principles and I started living the universal principles more consciously for a period of years, then new ideas started to come into my consciousness about how to actually create a better world. And so this is where, like, the latter part of the book talks about how do we use these universal principles in a concrete manner to actually help create a better world. And so there are some notions that are really important for us to consider. So rather than thinking that we're just here and that the earth is ours to do whatever we want with it while we're here, one of the concepts that, as you mentioned already, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, 4-H, and many other organizations, they teach the concept of leaving a place better than you found it. So if you're going out into the camp, out into the wilderness, and you come across a campground, and it has a bunch of firewood there, and it maybe has some food and snacks, set aside for somebody who might really need it. You don't just take all the wood and burn up the wood and eat all the food and just leave it empty. You try to make it better than you found. And so really it's a really important concept that we can use in our lives individually in a small scale. But in terms of, the magnitude of the issues and challenges that are facing the world, we can certainly take this concept of, doing something to create a better world, a world that's better than we found it. So we can use that and we apply that on a global scale. Then we can really make a big difference in the world. And so that concept is talked about in the Rainbow Bridge.
It is, and I love that part. Before we get to the bottom of the hour, I'd like you to share with us how people can find out more about you and if you have a website.
Sure. Well, the Rainbow Bridge is distributed by New Leaf. It's also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other major booksellers. So probably that would be the best way, is just to kind of go to Amazon or Barnes & Noble for individual copies. I do have a website. It's therainbowbridge.tv or therainbowbridge.org. Either one. It goes to the same place.
Okay. I have one last question, and it was fascinating. Although all of us out here that have student loans, we'd love to have a jubilee. I didn't even know that concept existed, but I thought, I'm going to really promote that. But I love it. So, and you say that half the people in the world struggle to survive on less than $2 a day. Can you imagine how lucky we are to be in the other half?
Yeah, it really is amazing when you think about, half the world is struggling to survive on less than $2 a day, and even if you take in consideration currency differences and barter arrangements and all kinds of things like that people are doing to help get by. I mean, there's still, you can see clearly there's enormous problems in the world when you have half the people in the world basically just completely struggling to survive. Mm-hmm. So we have, we can look at all the problems that we have. We can say, look, we've got multiple simultaneous global crises: the financial crisis, the environmental crisis, the energy crisis, health crisis, water crisis. I mean, you could just go on and on and on. And we can become very pessimistic and very, upset about that. But if I think that it's really very, very exciting, because all these things are not happening in a random way. Everything is happening all at once, and we only have one choice. We can either give up, which I don't think we're going to do, or we can come together and say, now is the time. Now is the time to come together to recognize that global problems require global solutions, and let's come together, come from our hearts at the same time that we're using our heads to help create a better world. And it is completely possible for us to do that. And I think that it is in our destiny to be living in peace and harmony, and that's why we're here in the world, to help do our part, whatever that part is, to help make that happen. And the Rainbow Bridge is designed to be a vehicle to bring together large numbers of people onto this bridge, so that we're walking and sort of traveling together across this bridge in time to a common future, and that we can see what that common future is, and that we can kind of envision a positive future together. So that's kind of some of the intentions behind the Rainbow Bridge.
And it does a very good job at that. The name of the book is The Rainbow Bridge, Bridge to Inner Peace and a World Peace by Brent Hunter. And I'd like to conclude with this quote that's in the book: "You must be the change you wish to see in the world." Mahatma Gandhi, and he's one of my idols. So thank you so much, Brent, for being with us. I loved it.
Thank you so much, Linda. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.